Now, let us go on to the next most important thing. Like I told you, we understood what the definition was, then we looked at what is the magnitude of the problem globally, then within the country, then we looked at what causes this, and especially within the Indian context, I told you the reasons why we have a lot of hospital acquired infections. Now, let us look at how do we prevent or control them. I think first and foremost, if you really look at this particular slide and this list, it tells you that nowadays we lay a lot of emphasis on standards. We lay a lot of emphasis on certification. So, NABH stands for National Accreditation Board for Hospitals and Healthcare Facilities. NABL stands for laboratories. So, National Accreditation Board for Laboratories. So, we have those kind of mechanisms where we are trying to maintain standards. Then we are looking at developing guidelines right from the country level right up to the local level. So, country develops policies, states and districts develops implementation plans or what are called as strategies, and we at the lowermost level implement certain things to prevent or control these infections, and those are called as local level. We also need to have a lot of capacity development. We need to train a lot of people, even people working within the hospital or people working are not sometimes aware of how to prevent and treat infections or hospital acquired infections. So, regulation, systems, capacity development and notification. If you see something, and I think it is important to bring it to the notice of people higher up. So, surveillance mechanism, notification, then giving what are called as these rewards and incentives. SBA stands for the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, you must have seen, and the Kayakalp awards, like for instance, say Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation has done very good work with respect to solid waste management. So, they get an award under the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan. You built a lot of toilets and you built a lot of people are using these toilets, there is access to water, etc. So, wherever you have been able to do these kind of sort of thing, you have to be rewarded for trying to put in place systems. So, there are even these Kayakalp awards are for those facilities which are able to control and prevent hospital acquired infections, and our laboratories and our facilities should be well sort of equipped to characterize which organisms sensitive, which organism is resistant, which are the antibiotics which can be used, which are something which you can't use because the organisms have developed resistance is something which we need to know. And I do not have to reiterate the fact that we need a lot of funding and we also need a lot of commitment. So, if we have to carry out these control mechanisms, I think it is important to really consider all of them in our own sort of limited situations. This is a beautiful illustration which tells you about how hospital acquired infections can spread. The reason I put this illustration very nicely sort of, it tells you there are about 6 different sort of, if you look at the 6 different chains wherein this chain or the cycle of infection control is, you can start from controlling the infectious agent, like for instance, whether it is a bacteria, whether it is a virus, whether it is a different organism like a fungus, etc., etc. You can start at the level of the agent, or you can also look at where they are. Like for instance, those are called as reservoir. You must have heard of reservoirs storing water. Similarly, you also have reservoirs which can store these infective organisms. Like for instance, typhoid causing bacteria, it can be stored in your gallbladder, and from time to time it can spread, it can be released and it can be spread and you may develop typhoid. Those are what are called as reservoir of infection. You can also look at how are they excreted, what are the portal of exit. You can look at modes of transmission. I told you it may spread through the blood, it may spread through urine, it may also spread through sort of routes which are from droplet or in air. So, these are modes of transmission. Then you can also look at portal of entry, how it enters the patient or how it enters the occupational staff who are working in those facility. That is called as portal of entry. And then you can also look at if the general condition of the person is very, very poor. If their immunity is not there, then the chances of even a small infection becoming a big infection is very, very high. So, this illustration very nicely tells you what are the 6 different sort of stations where you can actually prevent and control infections. So, this is what is called as cycle of control. So, illustration speaks much more than text, and that is why it is important to consider this illustration as a very, very important aspect in your own prevention and control measures. I hope it is clear in terms of really looking at the definition, the magnitude of the problem, what causes it, and how do you control it within your own situation.